just to you and I can just talk, but I mean, what do you see being the ideal abilities or talents that a reporter has to have in 2011 from the reporters that you're interacting with, who are covering you guys? Are there certain, things they need to possess now to really to stay ahead of everybody?
You know, it's an interesting question because I actually just read a great quote in an old Sanford book that I was reading about the fact that, two of the detectives in the book are talking, and the quote is something about the fact that they could hold a staff meeting in a telephone booth. Um, which I think is, so I think a lot of it is that ability to work, really, really independently and really identify well sort of the good sources from the bad sources. And that's weird for a guy that's in the PR business to say, I think, because I think part of me says that, you know, I can easily be, or people who share my job title can easily be bad sources. But I do think that, they have to rely so much more. I think reporters have to rely so much more on the connections of public relations people and the fact that we're going to be upfront with them. That I think I mean, I think just the ability to really sift those sources is good and sift the information. The other thing I saw the other day that just fascinated me to no end was I don't typically read USA Today online, but I was reading USA Today online. I looked at some of their other links, and one of their other links on a specific story was actually to Exxon's press release on it.
Oh, wow.
It was unbelievable to me. I'm like, wow, you're going right to and but actually it was pretty effective in the way they set it up. I actually don't know if I'm for or against it, but it was a really interesting, I thought, example of how companies are doing things that are making the reporter's job in some ways more difficult and in some ways easier. I guess it depends on the
Yeah.
role.
I mean, I think to go to our point as PR people, I've always found the more I can do a reporter's job for them, the more likely I am to get coverage. The more I can help them envision what a segment
Sure.
should look like, etc. But you're pointing out it's getting taken to a whole new level, which is we'll actually provide content for you to link to. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
wonder how much of that goes on with the pressure cooker, especially the TV reporters that have to crank stuff out online for their website as well, and they're not natural writers.
Hmm.
How much of it is they're going to cut and paste stuff from press releases, or they're going to link to, videos that we create or things like that. It's an interesting time to be a PR person because I think you can place a lot more of your content than you ever could have dreamed of, right, in the past, because there's such a daily appetite for new fresh video, photo content, and the journalist doesn't have time to create it all originally. Do you see that happening or not?
Yeah, because I think the niches are so small. I mean, we had a professor recently who wrote an article that was picked up by the New York Times. Then Bloomberg Law picked up the same topic and did a video chat with him. He wrote another op-ed about the piece, and we spent about 2 weeks trying to get one of the law publications to pick it up. And finally, he just said, I'm just going to go straight to the blogs with this because I know I can get the feedback that I want and I actually can reach the audience. So we spent a lot of time and energy trying to reach out to the media on that. And in the end, the best decision on that one was to go, straight to the blog. So I think that the niches are getting so small too that boy, that's awfully hard. Because I mean, I understand that the 30 people in the world that cared passionately about this topic cared passionately, but it's hard to you know for a reporter's time to go into something that 30 people care passionately
Yep.
about.
Yeah, that's interesting. It almost changes the way we have to measure success. You know what I mean? It's no longer just, uh, one big publication covering you. It can maybe there's a specific audience and a specific niche that you want to reach. You get in there, you get great coverage in that little area. That's what you needed. Um, that's interesting to me. What do you think about this idea, though? I've run into some reporters that are hesitant to use supplied material, like B-roll video, things like that. Oh, we need our own original stuff. We can't use your photos. We can't use that. Have you run into
Sure.
that a lot, or do you think that's changing where they're getting desperate enough or shorthanded enough that they'll use a lot more handouts maybe than they would have in the past?
Yeah, when I started 14 years ago doing more PR kind of stuff, I mean, that was definitely the case. It was obviously, no, we're not going to use your stuff if it came from, we're not going to use your canned stuff. We don't want you to send us pictures that. and again, if you think about even just how much the technology's changed, I'm also thinking about that from the perspective is I remember buying the first digital camera in the department that I had, and I was so happy because it took a 3.5 floppy, and so it was easy to transfer files back and forth. Well now, I mean, it's pretty rare we have somebody ask us for B-roll, but like I never had anybody lift a quote. Like if there's a quote that the dean said that was in a press release 10 years ago, I never had anybody lift that quote and use it. It's not uncommon now that somebody does that, and I think that the time pressures on their end are just so much greater, and the lines get so blurry in a job like mine between what's traditional media and what's not, because like the bulletin today at the University of St. Thomas goes out to, I think I was just looking at the list, goes out to like 28,000, 29,000 people.
Wow.
Well, that's a pretty big publication. And when you think about it, so I think those lines get blurred pretty quickly.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I mean, I think of even of the fact that we had some, especially in the smaller markets, even the outstate Minnesota TV stations. I noticed when they were covering our events, they were reading their TV script. They had actually incorporated parts of the press release. I mean, they're using our
Sure.
catchphrases and things, which is fantastic as PR people. Um, I just wonder how many PR people are doing this. I mean, it's good to be ahead of the curve. I think in that sense, you're going to get better results, aren't you? Than if you just assume they wouldn't want the stuff.
Oh, no question. And I think there's a ton of PR organizations out there, and a lot of them are in higher education. Looking back at the old textbooks that say things like, well, they won't take your quotes, and make sure that you remove all of the anything that could be seen as promotional. Make sure you remove that from your press release because reporters don't want to see that. And when you fax it to them, this is what it should look like. Well, we're still making decisions based on that, and the market's just changed in the past 5 years, even. I mean,
I'm
five
still
years
laughing
ago,
at your fax line. Slow,
yeah,
slow down. That was
yeah,
good. You're right.
but 5 years ago, if you would have said, well, I can go ahead and put up on YouTube a video, in a half an hour, I can have a video up on YouTube of this press conference, that can potentially go to millions of people. 5 years ago, nobody would have believed that was true. And now it's pretty commonplace. So I think some of our best practices even get in the way of really doing effective work right now.
I'm fascinated by that. With your job being at the University of St. Thomas Law School and being a rock star PR guy like you are, but how in academia is there still just a huge resistance? I mean, I go back to my time when I was at St. Thomas as a journalism student, and even then, there was kind of the book professors versus the real world professors. You know what I
Sure.
mean? There were the guys that worked at the Star Tribune, and the way they taught me was 100% different than the guys that were real kind of, they call them what, ivory tower academics, straight out of the
Sure.
book. And I always found personally as a student a lot more value from the real life guys because they were out in the market doing it. You know what I mean? Giving the best advice. How do you navigate that tension as a PR guy? Because you are in a profession, especially the legal profession, where there's so much caution and just from my experience working with lawyers on press releases, I'm surprised you can get anything out, Shadow. you
Right.
know, what's the risk? What's the risk? How do you navigate that? I mean, that's got to be challenging.
It's a little bit challenging. I mean, the mistake that I probably make more often than not is to do it and to ask permission later. Like, there's a couple of things that I've wanted to put up recently that's been video content where we have some folks in the law school that are now very, very sensitive to copyright issues. And I'm saying, well, the literature reads this way on it, and I think we can go ahead and post this. And they're saying, no, the case law is clearly you can't post that, and so it doesn't get posted. So I've had a
Mm,
couple of those frustrations lately. But higher ed in general is higher ed in general is really good because we have a lot of really rich content. And so I think that's how you overcome a lot of that is there's a richness of the content in the university because of the things that are being discussed that you really just can't get it in almost any other kind of. So from a PR professional standpoint, I can walk down the hallway and I can find without much digging six or seven pretty interesting stories. I have a student who's working on piracy courts right now that I talked to. I have a
Nice.
woman that just got back from Texas, and she's working on a she's doing the actual investigative work for a commutation hearing on a capital punishment case. And it's the kind of stuff it's a Grisham novel. I mean, is what it is. So the content is so good, but the other side of that is this is just the speed. And I think that's where the main tension comes from, is that um 2 months from now, 3 months from now is not good enough. And I think one of the reasons why we've had success lately is because I've gotten a group of folks that understand that if a reporter calls at noon, he doesn't want called back on Friday. He wants called back by 1.
Yep.
If a reporter calls and she's a producer and she's looking for a guest, she's looking for a guest that can drop something and get down there. So